Bugging in, bugging out, or getting home, you gotta have an area study. Stay tuned, guys. Alright, whether you're bugging in, bugging out, or trying to get home, you got to know what's around you. That's where your area study comes into play. Well, how do you do an area study? That's what we're going to talk about. Now, with the getting home, you're not going to be able to do as in-depth, just basically because as far as getting home, my mind, what I'm thinking is you're out of town on business, you're on vacation, something like that. And that's going to be hard to study every little square mile from where your house is at to where you're heading off to, but you can still do some. So anyway, let's get into it. Doing an area study. First thing you got to do is get 2 maps. Okay? 2 maps identical. If you're having difficulty finding maps, I mean, you can download a ton off the internet. At a lot of the state rest areas, right at the border, they have a state welcome rest area thing, whatever. And a lot of times those states have road maps. So if that's the only thing you can get that. But the biggest thing is to get 2 identical maps. And then I want you to get a notebook, pens, and I want you to get a few different color highlighters. Okay, and that's going to become evident here in a little bit. Let me see, looking down at my notes. Okay, so as far as the bugging out and the getting home, you have to establish your route. Okay, and multiple other routes. You don't want to have just one, because you never know what's going to happen. You're going to have multiple routes to get to where you're wanting to go. And this is where you're going to take map number 1. You're going to put it down on the table along with all your pencils and crayons and everything else I told you just needed. And you're going to take map number 2. You're not going to mark that, and you're going to put that in your pack. Okay? So you're sitting down at the table, you probably got your computer, your phone, your tablet, something like that. You're going to do some research. So what is it that you're going to need to research? You got the routes, find the best routes. With the routes, what you want to look for, my opinion, you want to avoid the threats and identify the resources, right? And we're going to break that down a little bit more here in a second. But before you even get to that, you're going to need to understand the type of terrain. Okay. Somebody in the Great Plains is not going to have the same terrain as somebody in the Rocky Mountains. Okay? Geometry tells us that the shortest distance between 2 points, is a straight line. Well, when it comes to different terrain, that's not always true. Okay, if you're on the east side of a big lake and you need to get to the west side of a big lake, swimming straight across the lake might not be the fastest and healthiest, especially this time of year. You guys can see what it's like out here with the mountains and stuff like that. I grew up in the mountains. Yeah, if you need to get from one ridge to the other, you probably don't want to go all the way down in the bottom of the creek and then walk all the way back up. You just want to walk around the bowl or the saddle or something like that and get where you're going. Longer distance, but easier walk. So you need to know about your terrain, and that's going to affect your routes. And all of your other routes that go with it. And that's where on the piece of paper, you're going to kind of want to write down routes, primary, secondary, etc., etc. And those might change halfway through your main route. So you don't just need 3 routes from point A to point B. You might need alternate routes halfway into the trip, okay? So be mindful of that. Okay, we're stopped at a stop sign. Great. Along your route, you're going to want to have pre-planned stops. Now, distance comes into effect here. If it's 5 miles from your point A, point B, you probably don't have to worry about it. 10 miles, probably don't have to worry about it. But if you're starting to get up into the 50 plus range, yeah, I know we're all big, bad, tough guys and we can just go to it, right? Yeah, but you might have your kids with you, you might have other people with you, elderly, big fat guy, and you're going to have to kind of have, you're going to have pre-planned stops, and you're going to have to scout around all those pre-planned stops. And let me get pulled in here. For me, what I plan on is every 3 days of walking, we're going to be taking a day or 2 off, okay? And we'll go more into that in the bugging out videos, as far as the true bugging out. Let me turn this down, maybe y'all can hear me better. So yeah, have those rest stops planned out, scout those stops, know what's around you. Okay, and as far as knowing what's around you, you can take a highlighter, highlight your routes, but then I want you to start checking out, let's start with resources. Let's start with the good things first, right? Okay, the resources that you're going to want to know about. Food sources, okay? Is there farms? Okay, I'm not talking about restaurants. That would fall under the threats, okay? Why am I not talking about restaurants? Because everybody and their brother is going to be going to restaurants, they're going to be going to grocery stores, they're going to go to Walmarts, they're going to be going to all these stores, but you're smarter than that. You're not going to do that. You're not going to get where all those crazy people are at. Yeah, if there's farms in the area, what are they growing? And it changes from year to year. Are they growing something that you can use? Okay, water sources. Where you're at, are there a lot of creeks, streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, things like that? If you are in Minnesota, okay, I probably didn't have a good Minnesota accent. You know what they call it, the land of 1,000 lakes, if I recall. Yeah, fishing kit might not be bad to have in your pack. Now, if you're out in the desert, yeah, probably don't have to worry about the fishing kit, but identifying the water sources is going to be huge, right? So identifying the water. Let me see. Caches. If you have a long bug out, if you have pre-planned caches that are already cached, okay, you're going to want to identify those, okay, and identify them on the map. Now, I know that sounds stupid, but just wait. It's going to make sense here in a minute. Shelter spots, okay? I'm not talking about the Holiday Inn. Are there still Holiday Inns? I guess there are. Anyway, I'm not talking about motel hotels. I am talking about abandoned houses. Maybe a old shed on the back of this farm that nobody goes to. abandoned gas station out in the middle of nowhere that nobody's messed around with. Knowing those type of things, okay, for emergency situations. Now, you have those marked, please, and this is not dealing with this video, but if you guys are looking for some shelter, don't just rolling up to some abandoned house and go on in. Try to check it out. Do a little bit of recon before you just stroll in to make sure nobody's in there. But shelter. Another one. Offices, businesses, and I don't mean Walmart. I don't mean that. I mean, yeah, office things. I mean, tree company, heating and air company, just any type of business that's not, you know, quote unquote retail. Okay. I'm going to be doing another video on that possibly today or tomorrow about just the resources that you can find in offices, and watch that video for a breakdown of it. Anybody you know along the way. Also, if you're planning on bugging in, if you got cousin Jerry and brother Earl and all these guys, you might not need to mark them on the map, but on your paper, I would definitely recommend writing the distance. Okay, you kind of know where they're at, but if something were to happen and you have to go someplace, you're probably going to want to have a list of distances, easy travel between there and here, blah, blah. I mean, you can break it down a lot more. That too. So anyway, so those are our resources. Yeah, farms, orchards, anything like that. Things that can help you out. Okay, you want to try to identify all that. Sorry, big pause, I know. Trying to figure out how I want to say this. It's going to depend on your area. I can sit here and rattle off a ton of area. Wow, I can sit here and rattle off a ton of resources that are in my area. But that's probably not going to help somebody in Arizona or Florida or Washington or Maine, you know what I mean? So sit down and think about your area, what's in there. Now, when I was saying offices, I do want to hit on, do not, and I highly stress, do not go to doctor's offices or clinics or veterinary hospitals. Why, G? Because all the crackheads already know about those places, okay? Unless you desperately need some sort of meds, something from one of those places, don't go there, because chances are that's going to be one of the first places that it's going to be hit, okay? But anyway, moving on to get, a little segue into the threats, right? Okay, the threats, much longer list. With your threats, and for your resources, I was going to tell you guys, depending on what color highlighters you are, highlight your resources like blue on the map, like mark them on the map. And for your threats, highlight them red. Whatever color you got, but those are the ones that'll kind of stand out depending on your map, okay? And then over on your notebook paper, when you're listing out the resources, kind of highlight blue and highlight red. That way you can just look at it real quick and know what's going on. So anyway, for the threats, you want to look where your population centers are. I preach this, guys. You want to stay away from people. If you're talking bugging out or getting home, something bad has just happened. People are losing their minds. They don't know what's going on. And that's not going to be a good place to be. So anyway, population centers, and within those population centers, if you know the rough areas, and I think you guys know what I mean, mark out the rough areas, the places you want to make sure you don't go, that you want to avoid, give a wide berth to. Okay, let me see, population centers, any jails or prisons along your route? Yeah, I would say you want to avoid those like the plague. So make sure you mark those, and you're transferring all this to your notebook. And every time you do that, say that there is a prison, maps, most of them anyway, are set up in a grid format. If you guys ever played Battleship, you know, D3 and all that, maps are kind of set up like that as well. So when you're writing on your notebook paper, prison, yeah, write that it's in quadrant D3 or whatever it is, square D3, and that way you can locate it if you have to. So jail, prisons, zoos, and exotic pet farms. Stay with me, guys. Okay, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I do believe that zoos, and I know that owners of these exotic pets, if something bad were to happen, instead of euthanizing their animals, a lot of them's just going to set them loose. In Ohio, just a few years ago, there was a exotic pet owner, and he decided he was going to take his own life, but before he did that, he set all of his animals free. There were lions roaming the woods of Ohio just a couple years ago. So if something bad is to happen, yeah, I can see that those owners and some caretaker at a zoo just opening the gates, guys. So be mindful of that. Okay, now we're back at water, but you said, whoa, gee, water's good. Okay, yes. But if you've got a river that you have to get across, you're going to have to take a bridge, right? Chances are somebody's going to identify that bridge as a great bottleneck, choke point, and they're going to be watching it, if not controlling it. So especially if you have rivers, things like that you have to cross, make sure you have identified multiple routes across that river. Now, if it's just a small body, if it's something you can wade across, swim across, once again, this time of year, I don't want to be doing that. But if there, I don't know if there's plenty of boats, you know, try to think of things to accomplish your objective, right? But water can be threats. Hospitals. Yeah, same reason as the doctor's offices, veterinarians. You want to avoid hospitals, drugstores, pretty much anything retail also. Any place that people are going to congregate, you want to avoid that. You know, imagine something happens, everybody's going to be running to the store to try to get all this stuff. I mean, look at the TP from a year ago, guys. Same thing, if something major were to happen, everybody's going to be running to these retail outlets, and they're going to be trying to snag as much stuff as they can. Once again, you don't want to be there. But any retail, yeah, the stores, restaurants, things of that nature. Another one I want to suggest avoiding are highway rest stops. Yeah, I know I told you just a minute ago that's a decent place to get mashed. Well, yeah, now it is. Everything's, well, not okay, but hadn't fallen apart yet. Yeah, I would recommend avoiding the rest stops. People, if they get caught on a highway, say you're talking an EMP, solar flare, something like that, their car dies, they're going to congregate at rest stops, exits, things like that, and they're pretty much just going to stay there because they don't have a get home bag, they don't have anything like that, right? They're waiting for the government to come take care of them. So try to avoid those places. And speaking of the government to come help you, government buildings. I would avoid all government buildings, guys. Something happens, that's where everybody's going to go to protest. So I would avoid all that. Okay, let's see here. So that kind of identifies a few of the resources and a few of the threats. On your notebook paper, like I said, go ahead and write down your resources, threats, contacts, you know, Uncle Joe, whoever it is. Write those down. And then try to break it down. Okay, food, med, water, you know, all the things we need, shelter. That way you can look really quick. I mean, heck, you might want to identify shelter with a different color and then break it down and then write a little thing on it. And here's where everybody, dude, I know like hardly nobody's going to do that. Hardly nobody. You guys know what I'm saying. Very few folks are going to do this. There we go. After you've got your map and you've done your research with your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever it is, then you have to physically go there. Oh, no. Yeah, you do. Now, I know with the get home, that's going to be near impossible. With the bugging in, you already ought to have a pretty good idea, okay? The bugging out, you ought to have a halfway decent idea also, because you've been going to your location multiple times to take stuff. And you're going to go there, you're going to take mental pictures of it. I mean, heck, I guess you could take regular pictures. Just be careful, somebody might call a popos on you. But you're going to see, you know, if there's this abandoned house, that, you know, it's like, hey, this might make a good shelter spot. But, you know, I'm not saying going in, but by surveying it, reconning it, it looks like there's people going in and out. Okay, it, you know, maybe not going to be the best spot. You know, there's a trailer park a half mile down the road with a bunch of meth heads in it. Yeah, maybe you want to pick a different spot. But what you want to do is on your notebook, write down, notice signs of activity. Blah. Yeah, heroin needles laying everywhere. Whatever it is, write it down. If you've identified, let me see, what are some good things here? Water source that you want to take a look at, swing by. Well, all of a sudden you get there and there's this big industrial blank pumping its wastewater into it. Yeah, maybe you don't want to do that. You want to mark that down. Farms. Well, if you get there and the only thing they're growing soybeans, me personally, soybeans ain't going to do me a whole lot of good because, well, they're just not. To each their own. If you guys have a recipe for soybeans, go ahead. You got that. Yeah, the offices and the businesses, if you researched it and found it and the address, and all of a sudden you get there and there's a 8-foot chain link fence around the thing, well, that's going to pose problems. But you're going to have to physically go there, physically go drive the routes, physically check out this stuff. And it is going to take time. Now, with old Google now driving around taking pictures of everything, it makes it a little bit easier, but I still recommend physically going on your way to your bug out location. Take one of your alternative routes just to try to get familiar with everything, because even though on paper it's like, well, it just goes through here and no big deal, well, then you get there and you find out that the terrain is straight up and down. Yeah, maybe you don't want to do that. But anyway, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up there. We've already ran long. But as far as doing an area study, get your maps. Oh, man, I almost forgot the most important thing. I told you to get 2 maps. Okay, one of them you're going to mark up, and there's going to be your notebook. You're going to have all your notes in it. The other map you're going to put in your pack. The reason why I say that is because you're going to study your marked up map. You're going to study your notebook. And at some point in time, you got to destroy that, guys. Okay? With the map that you carry in your pack, do not ever mark it up with your home, your bug out location, where your caches are at, different rest stops, pre-planned rest stops, any of these things. If for some reason you lose that map, bad guys get it, something like that, you're going to be showing everybody where to come to where you're at. Okay? So that's why you have 2 maps. You're going to mark one up and you're going to study and you're going to memorize that thing. And that way, when you pull out that second one, if something were to happen, you're going to be like, hey, I remember so-and-so's right here. And you can work out different little codes if you want. But yeah, just please, no matter what you do not mark down your location, your pre-planned rest areas, and the location of your caches, because that would be so bad. Okay, but now we can wrap it up. Now with that, we're going to wrap it up, guys, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we will talk to y'all after a while. Bye.